Imagine a world where art was flat, stiff, and lifeless. Then suddenly, everything changed. The Renaissance exploded across Europe and artists began painting with depth, emotion, and breathtaking realism. They invented perspective, revived ancient ideas, and created masterpieces that still inspire us today. In this video, we're counting down the 15 greatest Renaissance artists, the visionaries who reshaped history with brush, chisel, and imagination. If you love art and want more journeys like this, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Now let's step into the Renaissance. Caravaggio. Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, born in Milan in 1571, was one of the most dramatic painters of the late Renaissance. His life was as stormy as his art. He spent his early years training in Milan, but it was in Rome that his career exploded, and so did his reputation for trouble. Caravaggio was known for getting into fights, even facing charges of assault and eventually fleeing the city. But on the canvas, his daring changed painting forever. Caravaggio's approach was shocking for his time. Instead of painting saints and heroes as idealized, perfect figures, he used ordinary people as models, peasants, beggars, even strangers from the street. His saints had dirt under their nails, his Madonnas looked like real women, and his scenes felt immediate and human. What really set him apart was his use of light. Caravaggio lit parts of his paintings with an intense, almost theatrical beam, while plunging the rest into deep shadow. This style, later called tenebrism, made his figures leap from the darkness as if caught in a spotlight. The effect was powerful and emotional, pulling viewers right into the story. His influence spread like wildfire. Painters across Italy, Spain, and even the Netherlands became known as the Caravaggisti, followers of Caravaggio's bold style. They embraced his dramatic contrasts and lifelike figures, creating works that felt raw, urgent, and full of energy. Though Caravaggio died young in 1610, his impact was massive. He bridged the world of the Renaissance with the coming Baroque era, proving that religious art could be both spiritual and brutally real. His paintings still feel alive today, filled with light, shadow, and the drama of human experience. Jan van Eyck. Jan van Eyck was born around 1390 in what is now Belgium, and he became one of the most respected painters of the Northern Renaissance. He spent much of his career working in Bruges as a court painter for powerful nobles, including the Duke of Burgundy. That position gave him the freedom to experiment, and what he discovered would change painting forever. Van Eyck mastered a new material, oil paint. While other artists had used oils before, he pushed it further, turning it into a powerful tool. He applied thin, careful layers of paint, one on top of another, creating glowing surfaces that seemed to shine with light. His paintings had a depth and richness that no one had ever seen. Look closely at his works and you'll find astonishing detail. He painted fabrics that shimmered, jewels that sparkled, and even tiny reflections in glass or polished metal. He observed light like a scientist, studying how it bounced, how it softened shadows, and how colors blended in real life. With this approach, his portraits became lifelike in a way that stunned his contemporaries. Van Eyck's style made Northern European art more natural and realistic. His portraits didn't just show faces, they captured personality, presence, and even mood. Because of him, artists everywhere began to explore the possibilities of oil paint, adopting his methods of layering, detail, and careful observation. By the time he died in 1441, Van Eyck had helped spread Renaissance ideas beyond Italy. His innovations laid the foundation for the richness and realism that defined the Northern Renaissance. Through his paintings, he taught artists to look at the world more closely and to capture its beauty in glowing color and light. Sandro Botticelli. Sandro Botticelli was born in Florence in 1445, the son of a tanner. From an early age, he showed a vivid imagination and a gift for storytelling through pictures. He trained under the painter Fra Filippo Lippi, one of the finest artists of the time, and soon became part of the world around the powerful Medici family, who loved art and supported many young talents. Botticelli's style was graceful and poetic. His paintings often drew on myths from ancient times as well as stories from the Bible. Instead of making his figures look heavy or stiff, he gave them elegance and flow. His soft colors, delicate lines, and dreamlike settings made his paintings feel almost like visual poetry. In his own lifetime, people admired Botticelli for his beauty of design and imagination. He believed deeply in harmony and balance, so his scenes always carried a sense of order and calm. His reputation grew so great that even the Pope invited him to Rome to help decorate the walls of the Vatican with frescoes. What makes Botticelli stand out is how he blended the old and the new. He took inspiration from ancient myths and wove them into Christian art, showing that Renaissance artists could borrow from the past and still create something original. Works like The Birth of Venus and Primavera became symbols of the peaceful, ideal side of the Renaissance. By the time he died in 1510, Botticelli had left behind paintings that still speak to us today with their beauty and quiet magic. His art reminds us that the Renaissance was not only about science and perspective, it was also about imagination, grace, and the harmony of the human spirit. Albrecht Dürer. Albrecht Dürer was born in 1471 in the city of Nuremberg, Germany, into the family of a goldsmith. From a young age, he showed extraordinary skill in drawing. But Dürer wanted more than just craft. He wanted to understand art as both a science and a language. As a young man, he traveled south to Italy, where he encountered the ideas of the Italian Renaissance, perspective, proportion, and the study of classical art. Dürer absorbed these lessons and then returned home, determined to combine them with the sharp detail and precision of Northern European art. In doing so, he created a new style that blended the best of two worlds. Back in Nuremberg, Dürer set up a successful workshop. He painted altarpieces, portraits, and scenes of nature. He drew animals, plants, and people with such accuracy that they feel almost scientific. But his biggest breakthrough came through printmaking. Dürer mastered the arts of woodcut and engraving, carving images into blocks of wood or plates of metal. These could then be printed many times, allowing his images to spread across Europe far more widely than a single painting ever could. His engravings are famous for their astonishing detail. Every line, every shadow, and every symbol has meaning, inviting viewers to study them closely. Works like Melancholia I and Night, Death, and the Devil are filled with mystery and thought, showing that prints could be just as powerful as paintings. Dürer also created some of the earliest realistic self-portraits in European art, presenting himself not just as a craftsman, but as a creative thinker, a true intellectual. Through his writings on art, his prints, and his bold self-image, he helped raise the status of the artist in society. By the time he died in 1528, Albrecht Dürer had become one of the most respected artists in Europe. He proved that the Renaissance was not just an Italian story, it was an international movement of ideas, science, and creativity. His legacy is the bridge that carried Renaissance ideals across borders and into the future. Michelangelo Buonarroti was born in 1475 in the Tuscan town of Caprese, near Florence. From the start, it was clear he had extraordinary talent. As a boy, he was more interested in drawing and carving than in schoolwork, and by his teenage years, he was already turning stone into lifelike figures. People said he could see the statue hidden inside a block of marble and simply set it free with his chisel. His sculptures are some of the most famous in history. Figures like the Pieta or David show powerful bodies with muscles, movement, and deep emotion. Unlike the stiff figures of the past, Michelangelo's statues feel alive, as if they could step off their pedestals and begin to move. This ability earned him the nickname Il Divino, the Divine One. People believed his art carried something beyond human skill. But Michelangelo was not only a sculptor. In Rome, he was asked to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, one of the largest and most ambitious projects of the Renaissance. Though he thought of himself as more of a sculptor than a painter, Michelangelo accepted the challenge. The result was a masterpiece, hundreds of figures telling stories from the Bible painted high above on a curved ceiling. His figures twist, reach, and strain with such energy that the entire space feels alive with motion and meaning. Michelangelo also designed architecture, including the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, one of the grandest churches in the world. Everywhere he worked, he brought the same sense of power and drama. His influence was enormous. Later artists admired his muscular forms and emotional intensity so much that they began copying his style. This gave birth to a new trend called mannerism, where artists exaggerated poses and emotions, trying to capture Michelangelo's sense of drama. By the time he died in 1564, Michelangelo had transformed Renaissance art forever. He showed that art could be not only beautiful, but also overwhelming, dramatic, and filled with emotion. His work pushed human creativity to new heights, and even today people still stand in awe of his genius. El Greco. El Greco, whose real name was Domenikos Theotokopoulos, was born in 1541 on the island of Crete, which at the time was under Venetian rule. Crete was known for its religious icons, and that's where he first trained as an artist. But El Greco was never content to stay in one tradition. He left Crete and traveled west, first to Venice, where he studied under masters like Titian, and later to Rome, where he encountered the grandeur of high Renaissance art. Yet, even surrounded by the beauty and balance of the Renaissance, El Greco's vision was different. He wasn't interested in perfect proportion or calm harmony. He saw art as a way to express the spiritual and the mystical. Eventually, he moved to Spain, settling in the city of Toledo. There, he developed the style that made him unforgettable. El Greco's figures are instantly recognizable. They're tall, stretched, and almost otherworldly. His colors are bold, blues that glow, reds that burn, and strange greenish tones that feel almost supernatural. Instead of painting reality as it looked, El Greco painted as if he were capturing visions, dreams filled with light, shadow, and divine energy. When people in Toledo saw his works, they felt something different, a mixture of awe, mystery, and spiritual intensity. At the time, not everyone understood his approach. His distortions and dramatic effects seemed strange compared to the balanced art of Raphael or Michelangelo. But centuries later, critics and artists began to see El Greco as a man ahead of his time. His expressive brushwork and emotional power inspired later painters like Picasso and the Expressionists, who also believed art should show what the heart feels, not just what the eye sees. El Greco died in 1614, but today he is remembered as a visionary who dared to go against the rules of his age. By bending form, exaggerating space, and filling his canvases with raw spiritual energy, he stretched Renaissance art in bold new directions. His work stands as proof that sometimes the most radical voices are the ones the future will understand best. Jacopo Tintoretto. Jacopo Tintoretto, born in Venice in 1518, was nicknamed Il Furioso, the Furious One, and for good reason. His art was filled with speed, drama, and raw energy. The story goes that as a young apprentice, he briefly worked in Titian's studio, but his bold and restless style didn't fit in. Instead, Tintoretto carved out his own path, mixing the color brilliance of Venetian painting with the muscular power of Michelangelo's figures. From the start, Tintoretto painted on a grand scale. His works cover ceilings, walls, and massive canvases across Venice. He loved to shock viewers with action, angels plunging from the skies, saints battling darkness, and crowds of figures twisting in every direction. His use of light made the drama even more powerful. Bright flashes cut across deep shadows, like a spotlight on a stage. Tintoretto was also known for how quickly he worked. While other artists spent months perfecting details, he attacked the canvas with furious brushstrokes, often leaving traces of energy in the paint itself. His figures seemed caught in motion, as if they might leap out of the frame. This gave his art a sense of life and urgency that set him apart. At the time, some critics thought his speed was reckless, but others admired the emotion and power in his work. His approach helped push Renaissance art towards something new, the Baroque style, which embraced drama, intensity, and theatrical light. Centuries later, even Romantic painters admired Tintoretto for his wild brushwork and daring imagination. Tintoretto died in 1594, but his paintings still cover Venice today, from the vast halls of the Scuola Grande di San Rocco to churches filled with his visions. He proved that painting didn't have to be calm and balanced. It could be fast, dramatic, and overflowing with energy. In doing so, Tintoretto expanded the possibilities of Renaissance art and paved the way for the next great movement in European painting. Filippo Brunelleschi. Filippo Brunelleschi was born in Florence in 1377. From a young age, he stood out for his curiosity. While others looked at buildings and admired their beauty, Brunelleschi wanted to know how they were put together. He trained first as a goldsmith, but his real passion was understanding architecture and engineering. In his 20s, he traveled to Rome. There, he spent years carefully measuring and sketching the ruins of ancient temples. Most people saw them as crumbling stones. Brunelleschi saw them as puzzles waiting to be solved. He studied how arches were built, how columns carried weight, and how the Romans had once created massive structures that lasted for centuries. That knowledge came in handy when Florence faced a huge problem. The city's cathedral was unfinished, and the builders had no idea how to cover the giant space at the top. Everyone thought building a dome that large would be impossible. But Brunelleschi believed he had the answer. He designed a dome that didn't need the usual wooden supports. Instead, he invented new techniques using a double shell structure and special brick patterns to hold everything together. To carry the materials, he even built his own machines, lifting heavy stones high into the sky. After years of hard work, the dome of Florence Cathedral was completed. It amazed the world, and to this day, it stands as one of the greatest engineering achievements of the Renaissance. But Brunelleschi's genius didn't stop there. He also changed the way artists painted. Before him, paintings often looked flat. Figures and buildings were the same size whether they were close or far away. Brunelleschi discovered the rules of perspective. He showed that lines could meet at a single point, making distant objects look smaller and closer ones look larger. This made paintings look three-dimensional, like windows into another world. By the end of his life, almost every Renaissance painter used perspective to bring scenes to life. Brunelleschi left behind more than just a dome. He gave artists and builders a whole new way to imagine space and reality. Donatello. Donatello was born in Florence around 1386, and he grew up at a time when art was starting to change. He first trained as a goldsmith, but soon discovered that his real gift was in sculpture. From the beginning, Donatello had a sharp eye for detail and a desire to make stone and metal look alive. To improve his craft, he spent years studying the broken statues of ancient Greece and Rome. He carefully observed how muscles were carved, how poses looked natural, and how faces could show emotion. At that time, most art from the Middle Ages looked stiff and flat. Figures often seemed more symbolic than real, but Donatello wanted something different. He wanted his figures to feel human. One of his boldest steps was carving the first life-size nude statue seen in Europe since ancient times. For centuries, the human body had been hidden or simplified in art. Donatello brought it back with courage, showing that the human figure itself could be powerful, expressive, and beautiful. He also created a daring bronze statue of a soldier on horseback, something nobody had attempted since the days of Rome. Donatello was also a great experimenter. He developed a new style of relief carving, where figures were cut shallow into the surface but shaped in such a way that they seemed to step out toward the viewer. This technique, called schiacciato, gave his works depth and energy while still being part of the flat stone. His bold approach influenced countless artists who came after him, including a young Michelangelo who admired his ability to capture both strength and emotion. Donatello proved that sculpture could be more than decoration, it could be a window into human feeling, and in doing so, he helped shape the very spirit of Renaissance art. Hans Holbein. Hans Holbein the Younger was born in Augsburg, Germany in 1497 into a family of painters. From the start, he showed remarkable skill with the brush, but what made him truly stand out was his sharp eye for detail. He trained in Basel, where he absorbed not only the craft of painting, but also the humanist ideas of scholars like Erasmus. In fact, Erasmus himself became one of Holbein's early supporters, helping to connect him with the intellectual and cultural elite of Europe. By the early 1530s, Holbein had settled in London, and his timing could not have been better. England was in the middle of religious and political upheaval under King Henry VIII, and Holbein's talent quickly caught the king's attention. He soon became Henry's official court painter, responsible for creating the images that defined the monarchy for the public. His portraits of Henry VIII are some of the most iconic in art history, massive, commanding, and designed to project absolute authority. Yet Holbein's genius went beyond flattery. He captured the sparkle of jewels, the shimmer of silk, and even the texture of skin with incredible realism. When you look at his paintings, you don't just see clothes and crowns, you see the power, wealth, and ambition of the Tudor court. Holbein also painted many other figures of the time, nobles, merchants, ambassadors, even scholars. Each portrait feels alive, as if the sitter might step out of the frame and start speaking. His German precision, combined with Renaissance knowledge of light, perspective, and anatomy, gave his portraits a striking realism that no one in England had seen before. After Holbein, people expected portraits to be more than likenesses. They wanted them to capture personality, status, and the very essence of a person. In this way, he elevated portraiture into one of the great art forms of the Renaissance, blending northern detail with Italian innovation. Hans Holbein may not have lived as long as some of his contemporaries, but the standard he set for portraiture shaped European art for centuries. Sofonisba Anguissola. Sofonisba Anguissola was born around 1532 in Cremona, Italy, into a well-respected but not overly wealthy noble family. Unlike most young women of her time, she was given a proper education that included not just reading and music, but also painting. This was unusual because women were rarely trained as professional artists during the Renaissance. But Sofonisba's father encouraged her, and from an early age her talent began to shine. She studied under local painters, quickly surpassing expectations. By her late teens, she was already making a name for herself with portraits that felt warm, personal, and full of life. Unlike the stiff, formal portraits common at the time, Sofonisba's paintings captured natural gestures and expressions, people smiling, playing chess, or engaging with one another. These small touches made her art stand out and won her attention across Italy. Her reputation eventually reached Spain, where she was invited to join the royal court of King Philip II. There she became a lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth of Valois, and even taught painting to the Spanish princesses. It was a remarkable achievement because Sofonisba managed to navigate the strict rules of court life while still being recognized as a professional artist. What makes Sofonisba so important is not just her paintings, but the barriers she broke. She became the first female painter of the Renaissance to gain international fame. Other women looked to her as proof that an artistic career was possible, even in a world dominated by men. She exchanged letters and drawings with great masters like Michelangelo, who praised her talent and encouraged her growth. Sofonisba lived a long life, well into her 90s, and even in her later years, younger artists sought her out for advice. She left behind not only a body of graceful human portraits, but also a legacy that opened doors for women in art. Her story reminds us that the Renaissance was not just about famous men like Michelangelo or Leonardo. It was also about pioneers like Sofonisba Anguissola, who expanded the very idea of who could be an artist. Raphael. Raffaello Sanzio, known to us as Raphael, was born in 1483 in the Italian town of Urbino. From childhood, he showed remarkable talent. He lost both parents when he was young, but by the age of 17, he was already working as an independent painter. His early training in Umbria gave him a strong foundation, but when he moved to Florence, he encountered the works of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Their influence helped him refine his own style, graceful, balanced, and perfectly clear. Raphael's career took a dramatic turn when, at only 25 years old, he was invited to Rome to work for the Pope. There he was given one of the greatest commissions of the Renaissance to decorate the papal rooms in the Vatican. His frescoes, known as the Stanze di Raffaello, are filled with harmony, rich color, and a perfect balance between human figures and architectural space. Works like the School of Athens turned ancient philosophy into a living, breathing scene, filled with calm order and timeless beauty. What set Raphael apart was his ability to bring clarity to complexity. Where Michelangelo was powerful and dramatic and Leonardo was mysterious and experimental, Raphael was serene and balanced. Every figure in his paintings feels naturally placed, every gesture perfectly measured. His portraits also show warmth and humanity, capturing both beauty and personality. Raphael's success was so great that he managed a large workshop with many assistants, spreading his style far and wide. Even though his life was short, he died in 1520 at just 37 years old, he created an enormous body of work. His approach to composition became a model for centuries, influencing Baroque and even neoclassical art long after the Renaissance had ended. Together with Leonardo and Michelangelo, Raphael forms the trinity of the high Renaissance masters. If Leonardo represented curiosity and Michelangelo embodied power, Raphael stood for grace and harmony. His art showed that beauty could be both simple and profound, making him one of the most beloved painters of all time. Titian, born Tiziano Vecellio, rose from the mountain town of Pieve di Cadore to become the greatest painter of 16th century Venice. As a teenager, he trained under the Bellini brothers and worked alongside Giorgione, quickly gaining a reputation as someone who could take Venetian painting in a bold new direction. What made Titian stand out was his mastery of color. His reds burned with warmth, his blues carried the depth of a summer sky, and his flesh tones seemed to pulse with real blood beneath the surface. When people looked at his portraits of kings, emperors, and popes, they didn't just see rulers in stiff poses. They saw human beings full of character, with eyes that seemed to follow you across the room. But Titian was not only a portraitist. He painted mythological scenes filled with gods, goddesses, and heroes, yet he made them feel strikingly real. His Venus figures, for example, had a physical presence that felt approachable, even intimate, while his heroic battles and dramatic religious works carried the weight of epic storytelling. As he grew older, Titian became more daring with his brush. He no longer painted with tight, polished detail. Instead, he let the paint itself tell the story, dragging, smudging, and layering color so thickly that his late works feel almost modern. Up close, the strokes look wild and loose, but step back and they merge into something breathtaking. This fearless way of painting influenced generations. The Baroque masters studied his dramatic color, and centuries later, Impressionists admired his bold brushwork. Titian proved that paint could do more than just describe form. It could set a mood, stir emotion, and change how people experienced art. For Venice, he was more than a painter, he was a cultural treasure. And for art history, he was the man who showed that color itself could carry the weight of genius. Hieronymus Bosch. Hieronymus Bosch was born around 1450 in the Dutch town of Hertogenbosch, which is where his name comes from. On the surface, Bosch lived a normal life. He was part of a respected family, married well, and was even a member of a religious brotherhood in his town. But when you look at his paintings, you see a mind that was anything but ordinary. Unlike most Renaissance painters, Bosch did not focus on calm portraits or balanced, beautiful scenes. Instead, he turned the canvas into a stage for strange and often disturbing visions. His paintings are filled with strange animals, human figures twisted into monsters, and worlds that feel like they come straight from dreams, or even nightmares. In one corner you might see angels and paradise, and in another demons dragging people into chaos and fire. People in his own time were shocked by these images. Some saw them as warnings against sin. Others viewed them as puzzles filled with hidden messages and symbols. Whatever the case, Bosch forced viewers to think deeply about human weakness, temptation, and the battle between good and evil. What made Bosch special was that he showed art could be more than just copying what the eye sees. He painted the imagination. He painted fear, desire, and mystery. While his Italian contemporaries worked on perfect perspective and harmony, Bosch showed the wild, unpredictable side of the human mind. That made him one of the most original voices of the Renaissance. Centuries later, artists like Salvador Dali and the Surrealists would look at Bosch and say, "This man was one of us." Even though he lived in the 1400s, Bosch's strange and dreamlike worlds feel modern because they speak to emotions and thoughts we all still have today. By the time he died in 1516, Bosch had left behind art that continues to fascinate and confuse. His work reminds us that the Renaissance wasn't just about beauty and reason. It was also about exploring the mysteries of the human spirit. And in that way, Bosch stands as one of the most imaginative painters in history. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci is often called the ultimate Renaissance man. He was born in 1452 in a small village near Florence, Italy. From the very beginning, Leonardo was filled with endless curiosity. As a boy, he would watch birds in flight, the way rivers flowed, or how light reflected on water. He wanted to understand how everything worked. He trained as an artist in Florence under the great master Verrocchio, but Leonardo was never just a painter. He wanted to know about the world in every possible way. He studied mathematics, architecture, and engineering. He dissected human bodies to learn how muscles, bones, and organs really functioned. He filled notebooks with thousands of sketches, of plants, of machines, of anatomy, and of inventions that were far ahead of his time. Some of these designs look like helicopters, tanks, or submarines, hundreds of years before they could ever be built. As an artist, Leonardo transformed painting. He experimented with perspective, light, and shadow to give his figures depth and realism. He developed a soft, smoky blending technique called sfumato, which made faces look alive and full of emotion. His portraits were not just likenesses, they seemed to breathe and think. But what made Leonardo so special was the way he brought art and science together. For him, they were not separate worlds. Studying the body made his paintings more realistic. Observing nature gave him ideas for inventions. His curiosity fed his creativity, and his creativity fueled his discoveries. By the time he died in 1519, Leonardo had become a legend. His paintings, his notebooks, and his ideas captured the true spirit of the Renaissance, the belief that human beings can learn, create, and imagine without limits. He showed the world that knowledge and beauty belong together, and that curiosity is the greatest tool of all.